Hello. In this video, I want to talk about something that's quite controversial, unusually for me. It's about the proposed ban of electric collars. This is due to come into effect next February and will ban the use of electric collars in England. I've seen an awful lot of posts on social media celebrating this and saying how fantastic this is and these cruel and evil things will no longer be able to be used and this is a wonderful thing. And I saw some idiot put up about how all the dogs are smiling because of this. But I just think we need to stop and think for a moment. Now, let me say right off the bat, I don't use e-collars. I've never used an e-collar. I don't anticipate ever using an e-collar, though I do use spray collars and I use them in a very similar way to the way that most e-collar users use e-collars. So why do we use these tools if they're so cruel and awful? I don't think I know of more dog trainers than I can count on one hand that I would consider to use techniques that are cruel. So why do they use them? Well, I can't speak for e-collar users, but as I say, spray collars are quite similar. And the reason I use a spray collar is because it's one of the very few tools that I can use on a dog that hopefully the dog will pair with the stimulus and therefore become aversive to that stimulus. Because he thinks the spray was caused by, if I was dealing with a dog with a high prey drive, he believes it comes from, say, the sheep. It makes him not want to approach the sheep anymore. Now, there are lots of other training techniques that I and others can use that can basically say to him, I don't like you chasing the sheep, or I will offer you something positive if you don't chase the sheep. The problem with those is because the dog knows they come from us, it still gives him the option to go after them if he doesn't want what we have, or if he thinks we're not watching or paying attention. So the limit in those types of training, so with a force-free or positive trainer, they will offer the dog food or toys. But in the real world, they know just as well as I do that if you've got a dog who predates on sheep and it's presented with a sheep, there is no reward I can offer that will compete with the sheep, other than possibly another sheep. If I had a sheep I could produce from my pocket and say, look, don't run all the way over there, you can have this sheep, I'm sure the dog would take this sheep because it was more convenient. But it wouldn't stop him attacking another one tomorrow if I didn't have one. And I'm certainly not going to get him to choose, a tasty piece of chicken or a tasty bit of fish over the sheep. That's ridiculous. And I believe every positive trainer out there knows this. And this was evidenced last year when 3 balanced trainers, for want of a better term, Jamie Penrith, Danny Wells and Larry Crone, set up a fund and challenged all of the positive only force-free dog trainers and said, here is £50,000, which we will give to any one of you who can come forward and demonstrate your technique working to stop a dog who will kill prey animals. And they were going to film it and show it on social media. And they would have to go, okay, you've proved your point. We've seen now that you can do it. Now, I know if they put that post out and asked balanced or prama trainers to do this, they'd have been swamped. Thousands of people would have come forward and said, I'll take that, easy money. But although this post was up for several months on all social media platforms, not a single positive or force-free trainer came forward and accepted that invitation. Not one. Now, when you think how many thousands of them there are, not a single one came forward. So what does that tell us? It tells us that in reality, even they know that their training technique will not work in this situation. So not one of them was prepared to put themselves forward. And if they believed it would work, even if it wouldn't work, but they believed it would, surely one of them would have come forward. But I think it's really telling that none of them did. None of those ones you see on social media, none of the ones you see on TV, making TV shows, not one of them. So this tells me that clearly even they know that their type of training will not fix those dogs. Because in the reality, it's not training at all. It's just feeding a dog. And everybody knows how to do that already. People have tried that for, millennia. And it'll work very well with some things. Certainly for teaching new behaviors, great. Positive reinforcement only training, brilliant for that. But for stopping a dog doing something that he really wants to do, that's just not going to cut it. So my concern is now, bearing in mind that all of the force-free or positive only trainers know that this doesn't work, and yet have called to have a ban on one of the few things that does, what happens in the aftermath. Now, I've seen lots of posts, and I've put up a post myself about why I think this ban is a bad idea. And people have said on there, well, it's just lazy training. People who use these tools are just lazy trainers. What they need to do is just step up and train the dog, and maybe put the dog on a long line until it's trained. And I get the theory of that again. But in reality, not even one of them could offer up a training technique when challenged with it that would actually work. So we can talk romantically about we'll just train the dog. But whenever somebody made that comment on my post, I asked them, well, what does that look like? So you say we're going to train the dog. Talk me through how that's going to work. And not a single one could talk it through. I had one person on there who said, I train racing greyhounds, and there's few dogs with higher prey drives than that. And all of my dogs were trained using positive reinforcement. I didn't need to use any form of punishment. So I suggested to her that she contact that group of guys and say, look, is that offer still open? Because I've managed to train successfully all of my dogs. You can make an easy 50 grand. Why don't you contact them and take that up? And she said, oh, well, I'm not actually a trainer. These are just my own dogs that I've trained. And much as I'd like the 50 grand, that seems a step too far for me, so I'm going to decline. And up until now, nobody has said, well, I could do it. I'm going to contact them. So once we ban this tool, what happens to those dogs once we all accept that positive only training will not fix them? Well, my concern is all of those dogs will now spend the rest of their lives on these long lines and tethers that these people say put on them until the training is completed, because they all know the training will never complete. So we're just condemning thousands of dogs to having to spend the rest of their lives on long lines and training leads. And you've got all these young, enthusiastic, energetic dogs who will never be able to be let off because they won't recall as soon as they see, hear or smell a prey animal. And I think that's in itself bordering on cruelty, that dog will never get to run. Imagine the people who live in a rural area where they're surrounded by livestock animals all the time. Their dogs, even in the garden, will probably have to be tethered the rest of their lives to stop them from escaping. And somehow we feel this is better than an e-collar. I suspect every one of those dogs, if they had training with an e-collar, or were going to be tethered on the lead the rest of their lives, I think every one of those dogs would say they'd rather be trained. So while we're all celebrating and saying how wonderful this ban is, stop and think, really, are you helping? Or are you contributing to what will become a much bigger problem with lots of dogs who now are never let off the lead, never have the opportunity to truly run free because they're so badly educated? And you've created a scenario where one of the few things that might have made them able to come off the lead, you've now enforced that ban or brought that ban into effect by voting for it. And I think there's a lot of people who are just burying their heads in the sand and believing what they want to believe and not really looking at the bigger picture. If we look at Wales, where they did enforce that ban, apparently predation there has gone up on livestock by 30% since the ban. 30%. That'll mean more dogs shot, more dogs restricted, more dogs being put to sleep, more lost dogs who charge off because they can hear and smell sheep. I mean, how is that a good thing? And what are we going to have instead? Have Wales seen a sudden increase in positive only trainers who are fixing this? I suspect not. So before you celebrate too heartily, have a think about the repercussions of the choices that you've made.